John Mearsheimer, the theme of the Press Club event today is defining a new security architecture for the EU, bringing Russia out of the cold. Can that be achieved, do you think?
It's going to be extremely difficult, but if there's any hope of changing the situation and bringing Russia out of the cold, what has to be done is that the West has to abandon its efforts to make Ukraine part of the West and pull it out of Russia's orbit. And this means that what has to be done is that NATO expansion and EU expansion both have to be taken off the table, and the West has to go to great lengths to make sure that any government in the future in Kiev is not anti-Russian, and that if it is, that the West will not work with that government, because the only thing that will solve this crisis is to create a situation where the Russians think that Ukraine is not going to become part of the West and therefore a mortal enemy of Russia.
Sounds easy to convince perhaps on one side of the coin, but how will we be convincing Vladimir Putin?
It'll be very difficult because he does not trust the West at all at this point in time. It'll also be very difficult to get people in the West to change direction and to work to create a neutral Ukraine, because Western leaders are so deeply invested in the present policy. And this is what makes this present situation so tragic, that both the Russians and the West at this point in time have little reason to switch policies and to move to create a neutral Ukraine, which again I think is the only hope for getting out of this mess.
Are we heading towards a new Cold War?
Well, I think that we're already in a Cold War of sorts between the West and Russia. It's not a new Cold War in the sense that we're going back to where we were between 1945 and 1989, simply because Russia is not the Soviet Union. And the West is just a very different animal today than it was during the Cold War. But there's no question that we have a serious crisis between both NATO and the West on one side and the Russians on the other, and we don't seem to have a good way of getting out of it.